Every time it rains in Paris, every stone shines, every sewer smell climbs higher. Every face under the Crozetier arch at the university looks more tired and more awake at once. Walking the dim corridors back then, with my shoes squelching from another failed umbrella, I often thought how the city would swallow me if I let it. I remember that afternoon clearly, even now. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The university's review committee sat behind a long, battered oak table in the Salle Molière, their faces impassive, hands folded or drumming thoughtlessly on paperwork. "Thank you, Luc, for your presentation," said Madame Fournier. "We have reviewed your application and your project proposal. You are requesting funding and university backing to create a documentary about..." She squinted at the paper, already unimpressed. "The Invisible City, a portrait of Paris at dawn, through the eyes of undocumented workers. Garbage collectors and street sweepers." Her emphasis on garbage collectors stung. The room behind her was full of second-year students waiting for their 5-minute moment. But for me, it felt as if the world had paused. My palms sweated, memory blurring a little with fear. Maybe I should have looked down, defeated. Instead, I kept my chin up, watching the others lean in for the kill. "It's an unusual topic," said another, tapping his pen. "And if I may, not exactly commercial, is it?" They glanced between each other. Murmurs growing like drizzle patter on glass. Somebody at the end of the table, a guest judge from a television studio, offered the final blow. "We think you ought to reconsider. Paris is art, romance, revolution. You're very young, Luc. Don't you want to create something more inspiring?" Their words, young, not commercial, reconsider, felt like slaps. I'd worked every dawn for weeks before class, shadowing the men and women no one noticed, catching the pink light flooding Rue de Rennes, listening as the street sweepers sang in Spanish and Portuguese and Arabic before the world awoke. I had faces, voices, stories churning inside my camera and inside myself. I could feel all of Paris, raw and unsanitized, at my fingertips. But they couldn't see it, or wouldn't. "We have to reject your proposal," Madame Fournier said. Her voice polite but final. I nodded, mouth too dry for words. I packed my bag, the weight of my sketchbook full of smeared naproots and dirty gloves pressing against my ribs. I left the room without speaking. The smell of waxed linoleum and bitter coffee drifted behind me, as if the university itself wanted to wipe away my existence. The tram home was packed, everyone's faces pressed into phones and scarves, eyes heavy with resignation. The rain pressed down on the glass, blurring the city. Each bump in the track felt like a test of my resolve. Would I get off and vanish into the gray? I clung to that rejected proposal like a scrap of dignity. At my parents' apartment in Ivry, I could hear the television already on. My mother watched serials while finishing dinner. My father was fixing an old lamp at the kitchen table, hands steady, humming. I slipped inside, thinking maybe I could keep the disappointment to myself. But the world has a way of stripping you bare when you least desire it. "Eh, Luc, how did it go?" my father called. He didn't pause in his tinkering, but I could feel his expectation. I shrugged, cheeks hot. "Rejected. They said it was not commercial." My mother came out of the tiny kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, already frowning. "You waste so much time," she said, not unkind, but tired. An old refrain. "Why do you not make normal films like The Cousins? Even Anna, she is doing weddings now, and that pays." My father just grunted, fixing the lamp switch. "You will see. One day, you will need a real job. This is Paris, not cinema." I didn't answer. That night, I lay awake, rain leaking through a window I'd never gotten around to fixing. Across the hall, my sister Anna's laughter drifted from her phone call. She was right. She'd sold 8 wedding packages this month. made by-the-hour edits for local football clubs, paid her half of the rent. Documentary for her meant nostalgia about summers in the Dordogne, not filth and poverty and forgotten people. A week later, my uncle called from Lyon. He sold insurance now, but he'd once made a music video for someone semi-famous, so he felt qualified. On speakerphone, his voice rolled over my objections. "You are making yourself miserable with this dirty Paris project. You want to freeze before sunrise with beggars and immigrants? For what? Listen to your family, Luke. Nobody wants to see that side of things." Everyone had an opinion. At neighborhood gatherings, the aunts and uncles would shake their heads, as if my filmmaker status was a joke. "Our Luke, the artist," they'd say, tipsy on cheap wine, always with the same rueful smile. The word stuck. It wasn't malicious. It was fear, exhaustion, the simple need to keep the world comfortable. Through that cold autumn, I isolated myself. I filmed anyway. I bought second-hand mini DV tapes, borrowed a battered Sony from the back of the media library, and worked when everyone else slept. My fingers froze, my sneakers rotted. I drank gallons of burnt coffee, snatched 40-minute naps between shoots and shifts, washing dishes evenings at the Café du Moulin. I lost weight. My parents began to speak of me with a kind of embarrassed concern. Months became years of stubborn effort. I finished the edit in a one-room flat by the canal, lights strung up to cover the water stains. I submitted the piece everywhere and heard mostly nothing. A few small screenings in basements and back rooms. At one, an audience of 7 people watched. Another, only 2, one of whom immediately left. Each rejection felt as sharp as that first, but also less important. I knew, by this point, I could almost smell it. I was making something honest. Then came the break that didn't feel like a break at all. I received an email from a producer, Camille Laurent, someone who actually watched the first 15 minutes. She wanted to meet. We drank black coffee in a freezing park, and she told me, "It's not commercial, but it is important. Let's try to get some festivals to notice." I almost cried. I didn't. I just held her hand in both of mine, grateful for someone who finally looked at Paris the way I did. It was 2 years after that university committee rejection when things began to shift. Sous L'Aube, my Dawn documentary, got picked up at a small international festival in Portugal. Then another in Prague. Paris, at first, ignored it. When Rai, one of my central characters, was invited to speak with me about his life as a street sweeper, people listened. The film started conversations. I spoke on French radio, in classrooms, at embassies. Someone wanted to buy the streaming rights. The French channel Arte aired it late at night. I sat alone in my apartment and watched the credits roll, every name flickering against the walls I'd once leaned against in exhaustion. That summer, the Clermont-Ferrand Documentary Festival invited my film for a screening in Paris, at a respected cinémathèque not 4 blocks from the university that first mocked me. My family found out. Someone had seen the schedule pinned up at the local boulangerie, and the news ran wild in our group chat. Everyone had suddenly heard of it. My father told his friend at the repair shop. My mother's church group mentioned praying for me. My uncle, of music video fame, wanted 2 tickets. The day of the screening, I was wound so tight I couldn't speak. I stood outside the cinema, shoes nervously clean, trying to shut out the sound of my own heart thrashing. The street was wet from a morning shower, bright sun now turning every puddle gold. My nerves and hope warred inside me. As if the past could only be redeemed on this piece of pavement, in this city that had once tried to wash me away. People arrived in clusters, coats open, cheeks flushed. I saw familiar faces. My sister Anna, her arm linked with her new fiancé. My mother, her hair done up so tight she looked years younger. My father, lips pursed, silent but present. Even Madame Fournier, the committee chair, stood stiff amid the crowd, expression unreadable. There were neighbors. Men and women with crumpled invitations and careful hope. I recognized Rai and Claire, the garbage collector who'd sung in Portuguese in my film, their dignity shining as they approached, hand in hand. We lined up and shuffled in. The reception hall was small and smelled of old carpeting, but the screen was perfect, enormous. Darkness fell, and the room faded to a communal hush. In the film's first scene, the camera drifted through the Paris dawn streetlights twinkling off wet cobblestone, deliverymen unloading silent crates. Rai's broom shushing through the morning stillness. His deep voice, a mix of Portuguese and hesitant French, spoke about hope and hunger and sunrise. The audience was silent. I watched their faces in quick glances, my father tight-jawed, my mother hands clutched tight, my former professor leaned forward, brow furrowed. Scene after scene, the film pressed on, Claire fixing her makeup with a cracked mirror from a rubbish heap before beginning her shift. Fatima sending a voice message home while emptying restaurant bins. The city waking, layer by layer, all its romance not erased by hardship, but illuminated by it. I filmed them from below eye level, their dignity magnified, their fatigue honored. The city smiled and winced,